Citing grave breaches of national security at the highest levels of the Trump administration, the House Oversight Committee today launched an investigation into the White House security clearance process. Jared Kushner likely to be thrust into the limelight in that probe as the committee seeks clarity on just how he gained access to classified materials after lying about his contacts with foreign leaders on his background forms. Kushner also at the center of both the collusion questions under investigation by special counsel Robert Mueller. That includes that Trump Tower meeting with Russians promising dirt on Hillary Clinton and the obstruction of justice inquiry, including the firing of FBI Director Jim Comey, which Kushner backed. The panel and Matt Miller are still here. Matt Miller, this seems like something that could prove fertile ground. I had heard from one White House source that Trey Gowdy was actually suspicious enough about the professionalism or the sanctity of the security clearance process to have asked some questions himself. Now that Democrats are in control, this has to be a probe that the White House saw coming.
Yeah, look, I think what you see here is Elijah Cummings, the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, probing the real soft underbelly of the White House. One of the things the White House was able to get away with the past 2 years is not really answering questions from Congress about these issues. Trey Gowdy, you're right, did ask questions about the security clearance process, but when the White House blew him off and refused to answer, he wasn't willing to send a subpoena or do any kind of meaningful follow-up. And the question about Kushner is a serious one because the timeline of how he got his security clearance has continued to be shrouded in darkness. We know that in February of last year, the Deputy Attorney General took I would say, very unusual step of calling the White House counsel to say that the security clearance was being delayed again. We then saw a few months later, not the White House, but Kushner's personal criminal defense attorney make the announcement that he had been granted a security clearance, only to find out after the fact that he wasn't given a full security clearance. He was given top secret, but not given access to this level above that, secure classified information, secure compartmentalized information. And so the questions that have been outstanding are, was the FBI's initial reluctance to grant him a security clearance, did that change or was it ignored? Was it overruled? Did they abuse the security clearance process the same way they did with respect to Rob Porter, the staff secretary, who was allowed to keep a clearance long after they had received derogatory information about him?
There's no indication, Jonathan Lemire, that there was some sort of exoneration. It would appear just from the public record and the timing of all this that they simply reached an impasse with the intelligence community. I mean, he continues to have conversations with foreign leaders that, it's my understanding from former intel officials, are not logged and recorded in any sort of tradition. I don't know if it's illegal, but it's not the traditional way that phone calls and texts and WhatsApp exchanges are recorded in terms of sort of collecting all that information for the purposes of protecting American interests in terms of communicating with foreign adversaries.
Sure. I mean, Jared Kushner has always sort of existed outside the normal White House process, which was to great frustration of former Chief of Staff John Kelly, who for a while tried to rein that in. And let's back up there. Matthew is right that it was the Rob Porter incident that sort of triggered this major questions about the background clearance process at the White House when it was revealed that he was accused not once but twice of spousal abuse and still had a background check. That led to a review White House-wide of how this process was done and led to Kushner's being downgraded for a while before eventually it was restored. But there are other questions, too. Let's remember, Michael Flynn was allowed to maintain his top classified, his security clearance, even after it was learned the FBI was investigating that he lied to them about talking to a Russian ambassador. So this has been something that has been an issue for the White House throughout. You're right. This is something they knew was coming at some point. This is on that sort of whiteboard, if you will, of investigations they're preparing for that they knew would start coming once the Democrats took control of the House. And we see today sort of that first volley.
Along those lines, the Democrats have got a walk a fine line in terms of seeing whether they're governing or whether they're just doing investigations. And I'm not saying seeing whether Jared Kushner has the right security clearance is not important, but I think they've got to pick and choose really carefully where they point their guns, because at some point you don't want to give the Republicans the chance to say, hey, look, nobody's worrying about health care, nobody's worrying about opioids. All they want to do is investigate. So to me, for this, the first thing to come out, I was a little surprised. Not that obviously.
Well, let me push back, my dear friend.
Please.
Jared Kushner is sort of the pile of ethical and legal questions that no one can touch. John Kelly he didn't have any authority over him. He wasn't allowed to probe. Reince Priebus sure as hell had no authority over Jared Kushner. He's repelled other candidates to go in and work in this White House. He is really someone who's run amok of every process that's supposed to protect not just a White House but a president. If Flynn was a
I stand
potential.
corrected, as I usually am wrong.
I'm just saying, other than the Democrats, there's nobody out there who, Trey Gowdy tried, there's no one out there who can ask any questions about how Jared is able to touch classified information. Here are all of the flashpoints, too, that he's in the middle of. Well, he's in charge of Middle East peace talks, criminal justice reform, the opioid crisis. He's the liaison to Mexico and China. And all of the people that have sort of been caught up in this clearance, Jared Kushner, Mike Flynn Jr., Katie McFarland, John Bolton, Rob Porter. I mean, the list of people who have had access to classified information, while at the same time questions about whether foreign governments know more than the American government, seems to me a real flashing red light.
It's a terrible problem. The reason for security clearances, you don't go through that process just not for nothing. It's to prevent people who are actively working with a foreign power access to information, but also to keep people who are blackmailable from handling that.
That's the whole thing you swear to. I've been investigated twice for both of my I was in the government. I left to do the campaign. I was investigated a second time. I had a higher security clearance. What you do in person is you swear that there's nothing in your past that could be used against, not you. They don't care about you. It's not about you, Jared. It's about the U.S. government. It seems like this is a crowd of people with Donald Trump ripping up notes from his meetings that don't ever have the concerns of the government in mind.
They don't, and that's why I think, with all due deference to Donnie, this was
I said I was wrong.
Don't pile on, Donnie. Don't pile on.
My name in my book is actually Often Wrong, Never in Doubt. That is actually my book. Go ahead.
Fair enough. But it's a good bipartisan strategy. This is not an overtly political action. The law that the Trump administration had to follow had to hand over information to Congress to show that they were complying with these procedures was bipartisan enactment in 2018. They missed the deadline on it. And this is a whole list of people who violated these procedures or violated what would be the procedure in any other White House, people who were under criminal investigation, people who were convicted, and who still had access to this sort of information.
Matt Miller, this is a little inside, but Jamie Gorelick, a highly respected attorney, was in charge of Jared Kushner's background process. She'd done it for other high-profile people entering government and making that transition from the private sector to the public sector. At some point, she left that role, and Abbe Lowell took over, a different kind of lawyer. Will you just sort of break down why you might need someone like Jamie Gorelick, and then maybe why you might need someone like Abbe Lowell?
Jamie Gorelick is a very accomplished lawyer who represents a lot of famous people and famous companies and does very high-level work. Abbe Lowell is a criminal defense lawyer who gets you off, who either gets you out of being indicted or gets you off at trial if you are indicted. That's the difference. And I think when Jared Kushner became a subject of the Mueller investigation in 2017, he decided he needed a different kind of lawyer. And I think what it remains to be seen is when he did get that top secret clearance, that was interpreted. I think it was the reason his lawyer announced that he got the secured clearance. That was interpreted as that he was home free and that he wasn't going to be charged in the investigation. I think the questions that emerged afterwards about the extent of his clearance and how it was granted sort of leave that question now an open one. And so whether Abbe Lowell becomes a trial attorney for Jared Kushner down the road, I think still is an open question.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.